Welcome to Success Beneath the Surface, hosted by Deborah Fell, Managing Partner at Chief Outsiders. In healthcare innovation, success isn't just about breakthrough technology. It requires heroes at every level. Today's conversation with Joe Yaccarino, CEO of MTF Biologics, reveals how one of the world's largest tissue banks has built an organization where heroic acts happen daily, from donor families making selfless decisions in moments of tragedy, to engineers developing cutting-edge processes, to surgical teams delivering life-changing outcomes. Join Deborah as she and Joe explore how he scaled his organization from 100 to 1,400 people by recognizing that excellence isn't just expected, it's required at every level.
Joe, you and I have spoken before, so I was very excited when you agreed to be on this episode of the podcast. I was so intrigued by certainly your role as CEO, but your drive for MTF Biologics and all that you're doing. I mean, you're an organization, you're a nonprofit, you're a consortium, you're many things.
Lots of things.
And above all, very mission driven. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your company and where you are right now, and then go back to however far back you want to go back to what I call the beginning, and then tell us how you got from there to here. So in short, what's your story?
Yes, what's my story? Excellent. So I am the CEO of MTF Biologics. We are a nonprofit organization. We're one of the largest tissue banks in the world, tissue processors. And everyone knows about organ donation, but not many folks know that you can take the gift of human tissue, bone and soft tissue and skin and other things, and they come from deceased patients, unfortunately, and we can turn those into transplants. And that's what MTF does. And we do that lots and lots of times, over 500,000 transplants a year. Wow. So we're talking about a pretty big organization and lots of gifts of donation. When I think about the gift of donation, our typical donor is around 51 years old. So it's a young person, and they're typically not sick. They've died from a brain injury or a cardiac event, a trauma, an accident. And our families don't know us. They don't know who MTF is. They don't know really that much about donation. And they selflessly give us their loved one's tissue. And I really look at that as our duty to do the best job that we can.
How do they find their way to you in the first place if they don't know you and they're certainly in a traumatized position?
Yes. So there are things called organ procurement organizations, and they're throughout the country. There's 56 or 58 of them. And they obviously started in organs with kidneys and livers and hearts. And over the past, I would say 35 to 40 years, it really has grown to be also tissue, human tissue, bone, soft tissue, skin, and those kind of things. So if someone were to pass away today in New Jersey, there's the New Jersey Sharing Network. And that hospital would call the Sharing Network and say, we have a potential donor that meets the criteria of what might be in need. And the Sharing Network will then call us and say, MTF, we have a potential donor. And then we'll work through that arrangement of working through that program in that hospital and the family. Our OPOs deal directly with the families, and secondarily, we deal with families and can have families come and present, and we've done that. We want to talk a lot about culture, but every chance we get, we talk about donation and we talk about transplantation. And when we can get a donor family to come to speak to us, and we can get a recipient to speak to us, and we make that as often as we can, we make that available to our team to really understand what they're doing.
So you used an acronym, I think it was OPO?
Yes, Organ Procurement Organization.
Okay, Organ Procurement Organization.
Yes.
Now, sounds like there's a lot of science behind this, because someone has to figure out how this all works.
Yes.
How the tissue can be used. I don't want to say salvage, but I mean how it can be taken, how it can be stored, how it can get to you, and then you've got to get it somewhere else. So how does the science and the logistics of all that work?
Yes. So that's why we have lots of R&D. We have over 55 folks in R&D. We have lots of engineers. I'm an engineer myself.
Yeah.
You think about the processing and the storage and how tissues work and the effectiveness of those tissues. There's so much that goes into that. MTF was founded by surgeons 37 years ago. They were oncology surgeons, and they were looking for more access to tissue for their patients. Mm-hmm. And what they set out to do was create this organization that would have this tissue available. Mm-hmm. And we continue that. We continue to work with surgeons. My board has several surgeons on our board, and we have other advisory boards. And we're very interested in the clinical outcomes. We stand behind our tissues and how they work, and we believe they're the best in the business. Mm-hmm. And we prove that through clinical studies. We prove that even though we don't have to. Yeah. The way that the regulation works, we're obviously FDA regulated, and we do have some devices, but a lot of the things that we have are called human cell and tissue products, and it's not required that you have efficacy data. But MTF does an amazing job of understanding how this is working, why it's working, and telling the users of our tissue, the nurses, the doctors, the surgical teams, why it's the best thing for their patient.
You use the word amazing. I mean, it is really amazing that while at one end of the spectrum, it's the end of life for someone, and then the tissue goes through a whole process to become really a new beginning. Yes. Or a recipient, and then it lives on in them. So I imagine the impact on the families to realize that.
It's very powerful. And when we think about our mission is to save and heal lives, and we do that for patients, but we also heal as much as we can the families. And whenever a family hears about how many patients we were able to help with their loved ones' tissues, it's really beautiful. You can see the impact that it's making, and it gives them hope. Just like you said, that in such a tragedy, there's some good that's coming out of this.
How are you funded? I mean, what's even the question I'm asking? Do you take donations?
We are self-funded. We're really a medical device processor, a biologics processor. So we distribute directly to hospitals, okay. And the hospitals pay us. So there's no a typical 501c3 nonprofit might get some funding from donation. Our donations come through tissue and not through dollars. Okay. But if anyone is out there and they'd like to send us some dollar donations,
we'll take
mtfbiologics.org is
great. Yeah, that's great. It because you started off by saying no one knows you.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're a best kept secret.
And that's part of what we talked about a little bit in our conversation about marketing and branding and advertising. It's very interesting because the world is changing, and lots of people are obviously on the internet looking how to solve their problems. Yes. And we're looking at ways to get out there more. Obviously, we have a social media presence, and we're working on that and growing that. But we're looking more and more on how to get our name out there and how to get the tissues that are very much needed and work wonderfully and have patients say, I'd like MTF tissue.
Yeah. And so,
if I can tell you a quick story, So I started here as an engineer, and I got into the spinal processing, tissue processing, and I built lots of equipment with a company called Synthes at the time. Synthes was purchased by J&J since then, but Synthes was really a great organization. And I wound up building some equipment with another engineer, Jeff Tessier, if he's listening, out in Colorado. And we built machines, and that was a while ago. That was many years ago, but the machines still exist, and they're Rev 10 or 12 or whatever they are. I needed spine surgery 2 years ago. And after lots of physical therapy and injections, my doctor told me this is not going to get better. You need surgery. So I said, we're going to use MTF tissue, right? And he said, yes, we are. We have your tissue in our hospital. So and I wound up getting 2 implants in my cervical spine. I was in rough shape. I had spinal stenosis. I had numbness and all kinds of challenges with my health.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really obsessed with the situation. And it has come full circle. The things that I worked on developing and building and are now not only helping me, but helping my organization. And it really is, I can't be more grateful to my donor family and to everything that is possible through tissue donation.
That's awesome. So you're an engineer by training.
Yes.
You certainly leveraged that in your current organization. Did you see yourself umpty-ump years ago being in this business?
No, I never did. And I think about, I still remember the interview when I came here was, Joe, we'd like to make spinal implants. And I'm like, I'm a reasonably intelligent guy, engineer. I think I might be able to do that. And they said, we're going to make those out of human bone. And I said, is that even legal? I know what's,
yeah.
And it's not only legal, it's done millions and millions of times. And I had an opportunity to be part of that. There was less than 100 people in the company. We have 1,400 people now. So I've seen the growth. I've seen the operation scale. I've seen new products and new tissues. I've seen so many donor families and so many gifts and so many stories about the recipients that really, when we talk about who we are as an organization and what gets you out of bed in the morning, there's no better place when we talk about what we do. And it's obvious, and we get to plainly see the impact that we're making on people's lives. Because whenever we can get a person to talk about whether it was a donation or a transplantation, we do that. And people at MTF love that. And I believe that people are attracted to healthcare because they want to help others, and we have that here. We're not, and we get the benefit of not only helping recipients but helping donor families.
When you were growing up, did you have your mother or your father or any member of your family who was in some aspect of the healthcare business?
They weren't. No, my mom worked at the courthouse, and my dad was a hairstylist. No engineering, no healthcare. But they made it possible for me to do what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's interesting because in our company, believe it or not, we have a number of engineers turned chief marketing officers.
Yeah.
And you really see the process orientation, the critical thinking, the ability to periscope up and look outside of whatever it is you're doing and imagine, okay, we have this issue we're trying to solve. What are the steps and how do we get there? And so is your company your organization just full of people like that? I mean, is that the organization you're leading, or talk about
Yes, that's the organization that I want. And we're trying to build, and we're trying to create that culture of really thinking, talking about playing chess, thinking 5 moves ahead. What is the market going to do? How are patients being helped right now? What are the things that surgeons and surgical teams need? And really taking it as far out as we can to understand what the future will bring, because the future is changing dramatically. I mean, since COVID, we have wage increases and supply chain issues and inflation and hospital pressures. And if you don't think about that, if you're not thinking about the future and what the future brings, and you're not training folks to think that way, then we're going to miss out on opportunities, or worse, lose parts of our business. So
talk a little bit more about your culture. I'm always intrigued by this expression, we want to build a culture.
Yes.
How are the audience here is CEOs.
Yes.
Who may be very interested in understanding how you're building your culture. What are the steps you take? How do you start on the path?
It's interesting because there's a lot of definitions for leadership. The one that I like the most is leadership is the opportunity to create other leaders. And that's what we're trying to do here. When I looked at our organization, we had lots of our business, and we really didn't differentiate it. And one of the things that we did is created these strategic business units, and we put leaders in each one of these units and told them, this is your business. I believe in you that you can get this done, and I'm here to support you to get it to get what your growth needs, your targets, all the things that to build a team around you. We have a matrix organization where we have a functional leadership team, and then this business unit leadership team, and we work together, really supporting the customer. At the end of the day, it's about the customer. We want the customer to use our tissues as often as possible. And if we can get leaders in the organization to say, what do I need to get to those steps, whether it's in operations or sales or marketing or quality or R&D, we have that team that we put together. So that's the culture that I think we have created. It's maturing, and I love to see that. I think about that a lot when I see folks that are maturing in their roles, and they're asking for help, they're pushing back, they're challenging the status quo. And that's the culture of trust and knowing that they have our support and we are there to make them as successful as possible.
Yeah, I really love that definition of leadership. I'm a strong believer that great leaders change things. They change the world. They change the trajectory of an organization. They create change in systems, and they build things that are enduring. A leader is typically not there for the one and done and gone. They're there to create, to build, which means you have to have followers. You have to have other people. So, for instance, you as a leader, you can choose to wear a lot of hats and think you're the only one who can get things done. And look at what you've done.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You can do a lot, and there's a lot more in you. I can tell that.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
How do you let go to really then encourage these other leaders to step up and create their own devices, machines, disruption, whatever it is?
Yes. Well, and that's the hard part, right? Because when you're in it and you've been part of it for a long time, but you have to, I continually remind myself to step back and let them talk, not be the person talking in the room, be the listener, be the challenger of ideas, be the supporter. And it goes back to servant leadership and saying the executive team is here to support you. The executive team is here to use our experiences and our knowledge to get you to be successful in the roles that you have. And if you constantly say that, and you over communicate that, it starts to stick. It starts to, and it reminds myself that, hey, it's time to step back, just like you said, and let somebody else make that decision. And talk about failures and success. And if you're not failing, you're not trying. And it's my job and others' job to make sure those failures don't hurt our reputation, that never hurt our recipients or our customers or anything, but give people a chance to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So I think that's what we have here, and that continues to grow and to allow people to mature in their roles.
So speaking of several steps ahead and looking around corners, where do you see the future? What's next? I see other tissues being used. There's muscle, there's nerve, there's other things that we just, over the past couple of years, we've been using placenta. So from a cesarean birth, and that's a live tissue donation. And we turn that into wound care tissue forms for venous leg ulcers and diabetic foot ulcers and burns and acute wounds. So it really is taking the amazing human body and understanding how it can be used and using technology and innovation to create new modalities for success in healthcare. And I think we're still scratching the surface. There's still a lot of opportunities there. It's also thinking about what is the future, because everyone else who doesn't have this, we are blessed with these gifts of donation. So everyone else is saying, I have to figure out how to make a sports tendon without a human tendon. So they're trying to do that through technology. And we have to think about that. So we're thinking about the future and pairing allografts with synthetics and how do those work together, and understanding how you can augment the properties of both of those. And if we don't do that, then we'll be
the mimeograph machine, right?
Disrupted. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're looking for that disruption and making sure that we're part of the disruption.
Yeah. So don't tell any of your secrets here, because we don't want anybody to take them and go run with them. But it is fascinating, because I guess if you're not thinking, I mean, even though things are running well, you're really making an impact. If you're not thinking about the next, sooner or later, somebody else is doing that.
Absolutely.
Or B, something disrupts or runs out somewhere. So it's just thinking about the future and I'm just experiencing your focus on your customer and on their customer as well.
Absolutely. Yes. And we take that obviously very seriously. We know that our surgeons and their teams have to use our tissue, and it has to be right. And we hear wonderful things about our tissues and the quality of our tissue. And that speaks to who we are. It speaks to our processes. It speaks to our people that have really built that. But like you said, when I get in front of an audience of anybody who will listen to me, I always say there's another guy or gal standing up right now talking to their team. And they're saying, how can we figure out what they're doing?
Right.
How can we make this out of a synthetic? How can we make this out of an animal? And that's happening. And if we're not thinking about why we're better, and if we're not better, how we're going to incorporate some of those things, then again, we're not thinking about disruption.
And what a great race this is. I mean, this is a competition that every human being in the world would be thrilled to hear about. Because it's all about providing hope from tragedy, and hope for a future that one might not be able to have without these tissues used in their bodies. So there's your team with the expertise to get the tissue, store the tissue, get it to the right place. And I'm sure I'm saying this all wrong, but I'm just breaking it down.
That's fair. That's fair.
And then there's the skill of the surgeon.
There's
a whole talk about. There's a whole kind of chain. That has to be functioning at top notch and all thinking about the future.
And that's a huge focus from a marketing perspective and sales perspective. Is we work with some of the most amazing surgeons in the world, and we understand their techniques. We get them to speak about their techniques, and we get them to show their results, and the results speak for themselves. When you're in conferences and you see our surgeons talking about the tissues that were used, and the way that, exactly what you said, the way that the tissue is used, and the correct training that's associated with what patient. Not every patient is the right patient for this typical tissue or this typical procedure, and understand what that is, and when you have the best opportunity to heal your patient. And those things are critically important to us. And obviously we try to hang around with surgeons that is critically important too.
So you like hanging around with surgeons. I don't hear those words put together very frequently.
Yes, without them, we would, whenever I talk to our surgeons, without them, we would not have much to do. And whenever I talk to our donor partners and our families, I would say, without you, we would not have much to do. So we're a bridge between those, and treat that very seriously.
I can't think of a better way to really end this episode by saying that it occurs to me, while you may be the bridge, the heroes are at every level.
Absolutely.
Heroes are those who lost their lives. They didn't know they were going to be heroes. Their families are heroes. The whole supply chain, your company and your skill, your organization and your skills, and the surgeons. I mean, these require heroes at every level to really provide the future for people.
Completely agree. And I say that as often as I can, is every single person in our organization is part of this chain. And we can do all this work, and if we ship it to the wrong hospital, or we don't use the right box, or we started on the front end with, and people realize that. And I think that everybody wants to be part of a winning team, and know that what they do every day. Obviously, it's work, but it's really changing lives. And we talk about that constantly. And it's true. It's sincere. I can't be more sincere. Tomorrow we're celebrating Breast Reconstruction Awareness Day. So if you came to MTF in Edison, New Jersey, you'd see a lot of people in pink. We might even have the Pink Panther.
Yeah.
And one of our major tissue forms is used in breast reconstruction after mastectomy. Wow. So breast reconstruction awareness after mastectomy. So we'll have a surgeon speaker. We'll have a tissue recipient that got MTF tissue in their procedures. And the company just comes together and it becomes a sea of pink. Everybody has their shirts and their jackets that we have. And we celebrate what we're doing with others, with surgeons and recipients and donors and their families to make what we make happen and changing lives.
And so you spoke about a winning team, and what a winning team this is that you are leading.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for bringing this message and being on this episode of Success Beneath the Surface. It's been amazing.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Be sure to subscribe in all your favorite podcast apps. Just look for Success Beneath the Surface. Chief Outsiders, part-time growth executives with full-time results.